Hello, welcome to CATEX TV. My name is Frank Fortunato. This is a broadcast from Princeton, New Jersey. Today is Friday, July 29, 2011, the last work day of the month of July. We'll go to our main news in a minute. We just want to give a little update here. In the United States in Washington, D.C., last night at about 10 p.m., Speaker of the House John Boehner finally gave in and realized that he didn't have enough votes from his own party to pass even his very strict and harsh bill that would enforce trillions of dollars of cuts in the American budget and not raise any taxes. He's going to try again today. Meanwhile, the clock ticks ever closer. The American economy grew at its slowest rate in many years. Quarterly numbers came out today indicating that the economy has grown only 1.3% in the last period. This is far below what analysts had estimated. And in the Ukraine, there's been a mining disaster. At least 17 miners have been killed in a coal mine in the central part of the country. The Russian President Medvedev has sent his condolences to the Ukrainian government. Well, today's the day. In Paris, the French air safety authorities released their report on what happened to the Air France Flight 447 that crashed in the Atlantic in 2009. This is the French agency. They're saying that the pilots of an Air France plane that crashed, 447, lacked adequate training. France's air safety authorities said that the pilots had failed to discuss repeated stall warnings and didn't have the training to deal with the issue. Air France, of course, denied the accusation and said there were no reports to suggest that the pilots were not competent. All 228 people on board the flight from Rio to Paris died, of course. The French Air Safety Authority said that an account of the final minutes of the flight captured on the flight recorders concluded that the crew had, quote, failed to formally identify the loss of altitude despite an alarm ringing for nearly a minute. God knows what they were thinking. The pilot then responded by pointing the nose of the plane upwards instead of downwards. That's like a cardinal rule of learning how to fly. You learn that the very first thing. If you go into a stall, you press the nose down. It's counterintuitive, but it's the only way to get lift under the wings. If you pull the yoke up, the lift goes away. The pilot also failed to alert the passengers, according to the French authorities, about the crisis. The French Air Traffic Authority issued 10 new safety recommendations, including mandatory training for all pilots in France to ensure that they could handle a high-altitude stall. Yes. The flight recorders were found earlier this year. Air France said that the findings represented nothing that at this stage can be interpreted that the crew's technical competence was to be blamed for the crash. Air France further said the crew on duty showed professionalism and stayed committed until the end to operate the flight. Well, it's unknown as to where they would go. If they lacked that commitment, they were hurtling down to the ocean at a very fast rate. Air France and Airbus are both being investigated for alleged manslaughter in connection with the crash. Well, the drama with Validus and Transatlantic and AWACS continues. It's almost as entertaining as what's going on in Washington, D.C. Fortunately, the stakes aren't quite so high, although this possibly is a little more clear. Validus has fired the latest blast. They accused Transatlantic's board of spreading misinformation about the Validus offer and, quote, burying their heads in the sand and blaming it on their ill-advised acquisition agreement with Allied World. Yesterday, Transatlantic decided to sue Validus over Validus's intention to directly approach the Transatlantic shareholders. Transatlantic also decided to adopt a so-called poison pill strategy that would significantly dilute the holdings of any unwelcome potential buyer, i.e. Validus. The exchange of strongly worded statements came after Validus rejected Transatlantic's request that it sign a confidentiality agreement with a standstill provision, preventing it from approaching the Transatlantic shareholders without Transatlantic's permission. Ed Noonan, the Validus chairman, said that the tactics used by Transatlantic were a disappointment but not a surprise. Quote, we believe that their insistence on a standstill agreement is nothing more than a poorly disguised attempt to prevent us from bringing our superior proposal to the Transatlantic stockholders. Meanwhile, Allied World said that the merger is on track. Integration planning is well underway, the regulatory process is advancing, and we've received favorable reactions from the ratings agencies as to Trans-Allied's, they already have a name, combined financial strength. Don't count Ed Noonan out. Liberty Mutual's CAT bill for the first 6 months of the year totaled $1.8 billion, an increase of about 100% compared with the same period last year. But the Boston-based company still managed to return a net profit of $192 million for the first half. Of course, about $1.2 billion of that CAT impact was felt during the second quarter, as Liberty Mutual absorbed the impact of U.S. tornado activity. For the second quarter, Liberty slipped to a net loss of $170 million. During the same period last year, they saw a profit of $220 million. The group's combined ratio for the second quarter rose to about 112% from 104%. Now, that's to be expected with the kind of activity that was seen in the U.S. in the first quarter of this year. JLT in London achieved organic growth of 7% during the first half of the year, despite the impact of a weak insurance market. Profit before tax increased 9% year on year to £76.5 million, boosted by revenues also up 9% compared with the first half of 2010. Revenues were all the way up to £411 million. JLT's risk and insurance division contributed the vast majority of its revenue. £156 million came from retail, $171 million came from the Lloyd's market operations. And Lloyd's, this is a little bit interesting, Lloyd's can now compete on a more level playing field in New York. The New York Insurance Department granted Lloyd's a Secure 3 status, meaning that they now only have to post collateral of just 20% of their loss reserves. They can compete on an equal footing with the New York domicile companies. Previously, they had to post 100%. General Counsel of Lloyd's, Sean McGovern, told Insurance Day it gives managing agents the ability to compete on a more level playing field. Mr. McGovern also confirmed that Lloyd's is going to resubmit its application to become an admitted reinsurer in the state of Florida to obtain the same benefit on collateralization. Mr. McGovern also observed that the New York Insurance Exchange seemed to be back on track and indicated that he did not know how that entity would compete against Lloyd's in the future, but that they were monitoring it. In Texas, Tropical Storm Don is moving closer to the southeastern part of the state. It's not expected to become a hurricane. It's only got sustained winds of about 50 miles per hour. The one good thing about it is that it's expected to bring a whole lot of rain to parched Texas. And in Turkey, a natural gas pipeline bringing in gas from Iran exploded this morning. Apparently, there was a blast that struck the pipeline near the town of Meku, which is near the border, cut gas supplies off entirely. This area, of course, has been heavily trafficked by Kurdish militants in Iran, as well as Kurdish terrorists in Turkey. It's assumed that that may have been something to do with it. And it's another Friday, so the Arab Spring, which is now dragging on to the Arab summer, at least in Syria, continues. Forces of President Assad have fired at demonstrators in the southern city of Deraa. Tens of thousands of people in that city have again taken to the streets, demanding the downfall of the president. Witnesses say that the army is firing at demonstrators in alleyways. People are running for cover. Earlier today, a bomb blast struck a major oil pipeline in western Syria, causing oil to spill into a nearby lake. It was the second incident involving an oil pipeline in a month. The government says that saboteurs are striking installations. That's the news for today. When we speak to you next on Monday, the United States will be one day from default. We'll see what's going on. Have a very good weekend. Thank you for watching.